Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Welcome to our today's session. So the issue of 1971, it's a burning issue in Bangladesh. We want to know how 1971 is alive or not in Pakistan.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. I've written a little bit about it in one of my articles, and so basically the issue is that there are other wars that we have had with India, for example, 1965 war, and um, and and for a long time, and I think it's still celebrated every year with pomp celebrations. They believe that they had a big victory, and I don't want to get into the history of whether it was victorious or not, but but there's complete silence on 1971. So December comes and goes, and nothing from the official sources, from the television channels, and previously there was just one government channel, right? And newspapers, in newspapers you see some articles here and there, but there's complete official silence in terms of what happened, because Pakistan Army surrendered in 1971 to India, and conceded defeat, and East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So I suppose that nobody wants to, in Pakistan, nobody wants to admit that and talk about it. So it's not memorialized, it's not remembered.
It is a bit perplexing for an outsider like me to know that they do not actually want to remember this period of their history. I think the reason for
I mean, history, just to correct you, history remembers it, but official
yes,
sources, the state doesn't want to recognize it.
Socially, is there any social commemoration of the events?
No, there's nothing. Basically, other than a few newspapers and some intellectual circles, where you hear that we should talk about it, what happened and why it happened. I mean, it's all in the some history books, not like official history books, not like textbooks, but in history books there are details of what happened, how Bengalis were suppressed by the state for a long time before this, erupted into this all-out war and atrocities and whatnot, and separation of East Pakistan as Bangladesh. And so there's definitely some accounts of those events.
Pakistan, I believe, it also has a story to tell to the world about what happened in 1971. I think, if we in Bangladesh study our textbooks and our nationalist history sponsored by the state and also the state-led civil society, it's very one-sided in a sense that there is a very clear black and white binary drawn between Pakistan and Bangladesh. So these are the bad guys, all bad, no gray zone, no variety, very monolithic picture of Pakistan. And then also we also have a very monolithic picture of Bangladesh itself as well. All good guys who can do no wrong, and so on.
So there's this, so it's binary opposite, right? So
Yeah.
on one hand, you have no discussion on state side. On the other hand, 1971 is
very vocal.
It's only remembered as celebration, as victory. Victory it was, but then there were other aspects of it.
So why do you think is the Pakistani state not interested in telling its side of history?
Because it suffered defeat, and the movement of liberation won, and they also oppressed Bengali people, and so oppressor never wants to talk about its oppression. But it's not that, and so as you said that there were gray zones, so oppressors were on every side, and so that side of history is not recognized in Bangladesh as well, that how local people were oppressed, brutalized during and after the war, and what happened to the people. The human story is not there. And so same question can be asked, like why does Bangladesh not remember its own oppression? And so very legitimately, one should ask, why does Pakistan not remember? It's not just defeat, but it's oppression of a group of people.
Uh, just to give our audience a bit of context into what we're talking about, could you briefly mention what sort of operation we are specifically talking about, and if you're comfortable enough, your personal relationship to that episode?
Yeah, definitely. So, my mother's side of the family, my grandmother, grandfather, my maternal grandmother, grandfather, four of my uncles, and my aunt and my mother. So the larger family was there. Some of them were living in Dhaka and some in other parts of Bangladesh.
Were they Bengali speaking or
They were Urdu speaking.
they're Urdu speaking?
They were
Okay.
Urdu speaking. After the war, in the aftermath of the war, as we know, there were murders and torture of Urdu speaking people in East Pakistan. And so, both of my maternal grandparents were murdered. At that time, two of my maternal uncles were murdered. So, four people of the same family were murdered.
Do you happen to know the rationale behind this atrocity?
In order to get answers to your question, we must look at history. And so, if you look at history books, people who have done research on the narratives of what happened, we all know that the rebel group Mukti Bahini murdered, tortured, raped women. And so all those stories exist, and so there are books that have been written. So you must look at those. So people who are interested in knowing what exactly happened, what was the rationale, there are historical narratives that now exist on the basis of oral histories. So, for example, I'm aware of Yasmin Saikia's work and her book on remembering, not just book, but various articles on remembering 1971 war. She interviewed survivors in Bangladesh, Urdu-speaking people who had to face murder, rape, torture. They were maimed, and so I'm not in a position to give you a rationale, but the research exists and history books
So
do talk about those
the
things.
reason why this question pops up is there are academics, even seasoned academics. I can name one even now. For example, Naim Mohammed. He was responding to another scholar, Shormila Bose, although her work on 1971 is not that welcome in South Asian studies or especially in Bangladesh studies because of her critical attitude towards the state narrative in Bangladesh, which also happens to be the privileged narrative within the wider South Asian studies, I think. Naim Mohammed said that the killing of the Biharis and also the other atrocities that you mentioned, it should not be placed on par with the killing of the Bengalis. So there is always this comparison. And the rationale for this is the killing of Biharis. They took place in the form of revenge killing, and since it was revenge killing, not the first person to attack, so that is somehow justified. Although they will probably say that no, we are not justifying; we're just explaining. And there is a widespread currency of this narrative in Bangladesh. That is why this question pops up time and again. But as we perhaps are all able to recognize, even if someone is culpable for any of the crimes that were committed during the war, there should be free and fair trial. The due process has to be maintained. And even if a soldier who surrenders after the war, he or she should not be harmed in any way. And there could not be any justification for that. Unfortunately, that narrative and that psyche, we have yet to have that instilled in the minds of Bangladeshis, even the younger generations. But we hope that efforts like this will culminate in a sort of healthy environment in which we will be able to recognize that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of Naeem Mohammed's statement, so I can't comment on that. But there's never any justification of murder. And there's no justification of mutilation of bodies, rape of women, and which has been documented that it happened. So it's not like, people are making it up. And that's historical testimony. That's the personal testimony I just gave, that, that 4 members of the same family were murdered. And someone like my mother, who was 10 at that time, suffered that trauma to witness that. And so in a way, I'm also a witness of what happened, because I'm a child of that history, and so my mother had to endure. And it can't be justified that it ended and life moved on, and so it never happens. And so unless it's talked about and it's recognized, and whenever there is, these kind of events, murder, torture, rape, and all of these atrocities, Bangladesh or Pakistan or India or any other country or a nation or ethnicity cannot move forward unless those wounds are healed. Unless someone talks about it, apologizes. Pakistan should apologize. Same is the case with those who committed the crimes. They apologize. They must apologize, because I don't know if reparations are possible, but
But the recognition is certainly
but
possible.
but recognition must happen.
This is the most perplexing aspect of this history, of this episode of history. So Bangladesh, on the one hand, is so keen on getting international recognition for the atrocities that Pakistan army committed, and the atrocities that they pin on the Pakistani army and the other entities that are perceived to be or were actually affiliated with the Pakistani army. But on the other hand, Pakistan did not, as you mentioned, only stop at not talking about what happened. It also does not want to get recognition for the victims that were there. So victims on their side. And that does not only include the Urdu-speaking people living in Pakistan at that time. There were also pro-Pakistani Bengalis, its auxiliary forces, who suffered severe human rights violations after the fall of Dhaka in Pakistani word, and now in our word, the victory. So, is it simply because of the military defeat, or is there anything else going on in Pakistan? I mean, why are they not interested in getting it to the UN or moving it to bilateral discussion? For example, just a couple of days ago, there was this discussion on the future of Bangladesh-Pakistan relations within Bangladesh, and the interim government was asked about this, and they said, well, it would be better if Pakistan apologized for what happened in 1971. But they also said that they would move a bit away from the policies pursued by the previous autocratic regime, and they would try to have a working relationship with Pakistan. But the issue of 1971 never actually goes away. But Pakistan, it never really brings it up. And even when it brings it up, in a very apologetic or sidelining way, in a manner, okay, well, let's forget what happened 50 years ago. But I think there is a strong case to be made for Pakistan. You mentioned that your family, your mother's side of the family, they were harmed after the war.
Murdered.
Yes,
Not
murder.
harmed.
I was trying to include your mother as well, so a broad definition of harm. Although I understand that it might have a numbing effect to the brutality. I don't think that actually tells the entire story, because when I was looking at the history, I found that there was a law passed in 1973 in Bangladesh that provided blanket amnesty to all the crimes that pro-Bangladeshi forces committed, not only during and after the war, but more importantly, even before the war had begun. So the amnesty starts from March the 1st, 1971. The army did not start crackdown at least until the night of 25th of March.
Yeah.
So what happened from March 1, 1971 to March 25, 1971, that you had to provide amnesty to the pro-Bangladeshi forces during that period? I have two questions for you now. One, Was it only the revenge killing, as they want to put it? There were no racially motivated hatred or any ethnic tension prior to the events of 25th of March? Or, I mean, is it simply the case that Pakistan army was a group of madmen who wanted to kill Bengalis? Or was there something that gave the Pakistani army the justification for the crackdown? I mean, I'm not saying that they were morally good people, but maybe there were the case that some Urdu speaking or pro Pakistani people were also being attacked. So that is the first question, if you happen to know. And the second question is, why don't Pakistan bring it up?
Yeah. So to the first question, the answer is that there's definitely ethnic racial difference that caused all the problem. They never recognized Bengalis as equal, and so there is always, and it still is,
Who are the they? So is it
Pakistani state.
okay?
Pakistani
Just
state,
to be
which
sure, not
includes
the Urdu
army.
speaking people.
No, no, no.
Okay.
It's never. It's hardly ever about people, but the Pakistani state, and sometimes it seeps into the psyche of people because the state narratives are because there are people who will defend, this is the state narrative, this is our patriotism, etc., etc. But it's not my opinion. It's written in history books. It's a part of our history that Bengalis were not treated as equal, and so there was a problem. There is still a problem of Punjabi supremacy. So it's almost like the same kind of problem we'll see in different parts of the world, where one dominant group tries to take control of it, and it's always racial. The relationship of whites and blacks, or with Punjabis with other minorities, which include Baloch, people of Pashtun origin, and Bengalis, and various other ethnicities, they have been marginalized. And so there's definitely an issue. It's not my opinion. It's written in books. It's been analyzed. And so there is a problem there.
But how does the Urdu speaking people living in East Pakistan side by side with Bengalis for 24 years, from 1947 to 1971, how do they figure into this? I mean, yes, I can understand that there were hatred, perhaps misgivings about the Punjabis, the West Pakistan. But these people who were massacred, they were not from West Pakistan, they were not Punjabis, they were East Pakistanis.
Yeah.
So, how do we explain that?
I I mean, again, you have to refer to books, but as far as I can comment on it, this is also racial. There is a racial problem here, that one group considers itself superior and the other group as inferior, and therefore they can be murdered, they can be raped, their women can be raped, they can be tortured. There's no other justification for it. If you and I consider each other as equal, I'll treat you as my brother, as my fellow human being, and I'll do what I do for anyone else. But if I think of myself as superior and you as inferior, and it could be Bengali, Bihari, it could be Punjabi Bengali, and it could be any other relationship, but anyone who places themselves in that superior position or treats other person's life as less than, right? And this is exactly what's happening in Israel and Palestine. They don't consider Palestinians as humans. They don't consider, and so their life is disposable. And so as far as I can tell, this is exactly what happened between Pakistan and Bangladesh, and within Bangladesh, between rebel groups and other Urdu-speaking people. It was its roles are reversed, exactly. And so we can I think I can certainly say with confidence that this was a racial problem. When you consider someone as less than, you can enter their home and kill people and murder and rape people, and there are horrible stories that I've read in articles and books about what happened. And so ordinary people going to their neighbors' houses and killing and murdering their neighbors. They lived peacefully with them, and all of a sudden, these events happen, and they are treated as less than human, and they're disposable. They can be mutilated, tortured, raped, maimed, all sorts of atrocities, brutalization happened. And so there's no other justification. You cannot, the justifications that you mentioned earlier, that they sided with Pakistan, etc., they're not strong enough. The only reason that can justify killing another person, torturing another person, is when you consider them less than yourself and you place yourself in superior position. It's also a problem of power. When you have weapons, when you have all the power, then you marginalize, torture other people, because you consider them less than human, but you consider superior, not only just superior, but also you have power that you can exercise over other groups of people who might not have the same kind of power.
Uh, Again, back to my second question, you are talking about recognition, and I think this is something that we all can agree on. Well, in Bangladesh, it's a bit different because they are the winning party. So when you win, sometimes the actions that have resulted in horrible acts and horrible consequences, they also become stories of your glory. So, if we read against the grain, maybe we will find that a lot of our heroes, I mean, that is to say, Bangladeshi heroes, probably their heroics are not.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a problem with stories of glory and patriotic, nationalistic stories. That's why, nationalistic paradigm is problematic, because it hides, it elides, and it covers up all the other problems. So, uh, uh, I've written a little bit about the photographs of victory that appeared like after 1971. Everywhere there was joy and celebration, etc., etc. Yes, but then that doesn't mean that we completely erase the history that happened. And so I personally think that that the narratives of absolute victory and absolute celebration, that those are very problematic.
So in Bangladesh, we have, or we used to have, a very strong social movement for justice, as they put it, or as they viewed it, and they demanded some sort of recognition as well as trial for the crimes that happened in 1971. Obviously, only the crimes, only the sufferings that they suffered, and it was also very politicized, to the extent that many opposition political party leaders within Bangladesh, who claimed that they were only supporting Pakistan, they did not take part in the violence and things like that, they were executed in trials that were controversial, to say the least. In Pakistan, is there any social movement, at least in intellectual circles or student groups, activist circles? Are they interested in pursuing this? Because I ask this question a lot whenever in abroad I meet Pakistani friends, people. They're very lovely people. I mean, there is no ontological difference between peoples, right? Although the nationalist histories would try to put, these
Big
are
difference,
yeah,
yeah.
but yeah. So they always come to me with a very sorry tone. I mean, um, in the UK, for example, I remember there were at least on 3 occasions in which Pakistani guys came up to me, and once they learned that I was from Bangladesh, they were like, "Oh, we're very sorry for what happened in 1971." And I told them, "Well, did anyone from Bangladesh ever tell you that they were sorry for what happened in 1971?" So my question is, in the younger generation, they seem to be more reconciliatory. But is the reconciliation, the tone of reconciliation that we hear from the younger Pakistani voices, is it just, or is it also one-sided?
The recognition among the intellectual circles, academics, students It's always there, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Students currently are also interested. Like I've met students here at NUQ who want to do the projects on the memories of 1971. I've had students in Pakistan who have done that, and so um, uh, because there is complete silence on the part of the state, there are always other voices that try to fill that gap. And so I'm not aware of. So pardon my ignorance, but I'm not aware if there is a social movement per se. But those voices have appeared time and again right after 1971, and over the history last 50 years or so history.
It feels like there are two concerns. On the one hand, we have the Pakistani state who has engaged in military crackdown in the past as well as in the present. And there are ethnic strifes that the Pakistani state sometimes exploits and sometimes suppresses through brute military force. On the other hand, there is the issue of the atrocities that pro Bangladeshi forces subjected the Urdu speaking people to. If we talk about the latter issue, are we legitimizing the former? So, how do we reconcile these two concerns?
These are not mutually exclusive situation. So it's not like only one or the other will happen, or one dependent on the other. I don't think that's those are dependent issues in any ways. I personally think that the recognition should be, and until that happens, there's no future. There's no way forward. People are still suffering.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Shahra Mokhtar,
Thank you.
for joining us. We are very glad to have you, and we hope to see you back with us, perhaps on another issue.
Thank you.